Hello, critical thinking classroom. This is Dr. Annette Feravich, and I am here to talk to you about being sexy. And I'm going to tell you the reason why I wanted to talk about this. It really is, as I go through my day, you likely maybe have picked up on that there are things that I bring to you, right? The thoughts and I do believe in a higher power, and I believe that a lot of those thoughts come from, a much better, higher place than my sometimes limited thinking. And thank God for that. Thank God that I am just not limited to the ideas that are in my own head. But yeah, let's just ponder that for one moment. Thank God I am not limited to just the ideas in my own head. Although I do think that there are a lot of people who are just plain content with only having the ideas that they have in their own head and really get flustered and anxious when they have to contend with ideas that are different from other people's heads, right? But we have to do it on a daily basis. And sometimes we keep those ideas of other people at bay. Why? Because it's just too much, right? Sometimes it's just too much. It makes us feel bad when our ideas, sometimes it makes us feel bad when our ideas are challenged, especially if they're challenged by somebody who knows what they're talking about. And then we can feel like we don't know, we should have, this is what I feel passionate about, yet I can't even speak intelligently on it. I say things like a belief has no evidence, right? And then you just look stupid. Somebody said that to me last night. Well, I don't know about your beliefs, but my beliefs have evidence. Maybe yours don't. I don't know. But, and also beliefs can also be, as we've said before, self-fulfilling as well. So you may believe something that sort of may or may not be true, like you're sexy, right? But when you sort of put that concept into motion, it becomes true, a self-fulfilling prophecy. If I feel sexy, guess what? I am. Yeah, I'd have to say 9 times out of 10. And when we're talking about sexy, for me, what I'm talking about is sex appeal, that you are attractive, all of these things, but to a higher level, right? As in, hey, I might want to date you. I might want to have a lasting experience with you. That's what we're talking about when we're talking about sexy. We're not talking about having sex. We're talking about how we feel about ourselves. And this is why it came up for me. Because I had all right, it wasn't really bad. On the scale of 1 to 10, where 10 is the worst Mother's Day ever and 1 is the best, this was about an 8.5. So it was pretty bad. It was a pretty bad Mother's Day. I mean, I wasn't alone. And I was happy about that. I was happy that my son came to visit me. I was happy about that. That is for sure. I wasn't sure why he came to visit me, but I was happy that he came to visit me. But after the fact, I was sad because it did not, and most Mother's Days, actually, sorry kids, but most Mother's Days have not been nice for me. It has really been the worst holiday of the year for me. Why? Because it's the one holiday I don't plan. I have to leave it up to somebody else to plan, and guess what they do? They F it up. That's what they do with a big capital F. And I think a lot of it really does have to do with just this this disease of such a lack of respect for women and a lack of respect for men and a lack of respect for ourselves as a woman or a man or, whatever we choose to be today, right? It's just a lack of respect for who we actually are. Even when you take that as an example, right? I don't like being a woman. I want to be a man. It's a lack of respect for who you are. When you have to force people into, or control them and force them into situations that they don't want to be in, that's a lack of respect for who you are, right? Because you don't have the whatever it takes to keep that person in the relationship or in your life. And those are facts. Now, it can be what that person needs is something that is, unrealistic or crazy or whatever, and that's why you can't provide it. But there are all, the biggest reason why we're not with somebody is because they don't provide our needs or we don't provide for their needs, right? Uh, that's why if we're providing for one another's needs, we likely will be with one another. And you continue to provide for my needs. Why wouldn't I be there with you? If you continue to provide for my needs, why wouldn't I be there for you, right? But we have all kinds of needs, and we've seen in the pyramid, the greatest need are those needs that we have for, you know, self-fulfillment, basically self-actualization, right? Those are the needs, the greatest needs that we have. But back to my story, because I didn't want to not tell you the story, right? So this kind of, in a way, I give you guys a new title, a new topic, and I kind of blend what we've been talking about with this new title and topic as we roll into it closer to the end. But I did of our classroom day. We usually roll into the title closer to the end of the classroom day. We haven't really even gotten into attachment yet. So we had attraction, right? And self-worth and optimism, resilience makes us attractive. Then we had this attachment, and then we have sexy. So we haven't even talked about attachment yet, although we have slightly. Yesterday, I don't know how long I ran yesterday, because I did our makeup class for the critical classroom yesterday, day 27. I don't know how long that class lasted. But I don't think I even touched. I mentioned it, but I don't really have touched on the concepts. So before I forget, because this will come up at the end, I want to tell you why I named this sexy, and it was because this. What is something that we can do, men and women? What is something that we can do to boost up our sex appeal? And the things that I think that we can do equate to, I'm thinking of somebody else in my head right now, equate to our self-esteem, feelings of self-worth, resilience, optimism. There is really no greater attraction than, love, of course, right? So that's a deep emotional feeling. But for the attraction, it's really sexiness. It is the desire to, creating a desire to procreate, right? Creating a desire to have children. That is our very innate natural tendency to procreate, right? So if we're talking about procreating, we are talking about our very natural tendencies to want to have a sexual partner, right? So again, back to the concept of attraction, right? We want to be a magnet. So this is what I talked about yesterday and day 27 of our class, all right? So we want to be a magnet, and sometimes we're a magnet for the wrong people, sometimes we're a magnet for the right people. Rarely are we a magnet for the right person. Rarely are we a magnet for the right person, right? That's what we a lot of times have to kind of fix up. And that's what we are doing in these classrooms as well, right? Trying to figure out who we are so that we could serve up the best portion of ourselves, or the best whole, right? The best complete picture of ourselves to somebody that is going to be good for us, that's going to complement us. Not you're pretty, but complement us as in complete us, as in you complete me, right? In that kind of concept. So when I felt really bad and did have myself a good cry after my son left, and that's okay. That's not depression. Mother's Day didn't turn out like I wanted it to, right? Not and that's going to hurt my feelings. When it doesn't turn out the way that I want it to, it's going to hurt my feelings. And so I had myself a good cry. But then what I did was I, in my own way, right? And I won't divulge that because it's private to me, for me. In my own way, I made myself feel sexy. So very specifically, I didn't make myself feel good, right? Because that could be fulfilled in a lot of different ways. I might eat a tub of ice cream. I happen to have delicious ice cream in the freezer right now, and I could eat a tub of that, but that really wouldn't make me feel better, would it? But I will tell you that feeling sexy without having sex, right? Feeling sexy without having sex is a real plus. And I'll give you a little bit of it. I listen to music and I dance is one of the things that I do. So I gave you a little bit of it. What I would do to make myself feel good about myself, and very specifically using the word sexy. So I feel sexy about myself. All right. So for this sort of duration as we're talking, I want you to keep in the back of your mind what it is that you do that makes you feel sexy. Now, I want to put some parameters on that as well, because again, I'm not asking you to have sex. That's not what I'm asking you to do at all. So it's not sexy is not about having sex. Although during sex, we can and should feel sexy, right? But that's not what I'm talking about here. That's not how we have a comeback from, hear me on this. It's not how we have a comeback from a shot or a hit to our self-esteem by having sex. That's not how we come back from a hit to our self-esteem by having sex. It will absolutely have the reverse effect on you. It absolutely will. I can't imagine a woman in particular, right? And I just heard yesterday, from somebody that, that they'll call people up and it really will be on college campus. I mean, this person had a word for it, a name for it. It wasn't a booty call, but in my language, it would have been a booty call. And it's just hard for me really to imagine that is in any way, well, the word is fulfilling, I'm thinking of it. I guess nobody cares about a fulfilling relationship if they're simply having sex with somebody, right? Calling them up and texting and simply having sex. Obviously, that is not to fulfill my need for a deep, long-lasting relationship. Nevertheless, I can't imagine, just in the same way that Facebook or Instagram is intoxicating, right, but leaves us feeling more depressed when we get off of it. The same thing. When you get off of that, I can't imagine that you don't feel more depressed about yourself. So when I'm talking about feeling sexy about yourself, I'm not talking about sex. I'm talking about figuring out ways that you by yourself, and not even sex with yourself. I'm not even talking about that. I'm talking about ways in which you by yourself can feel sexy. Now, I'm going to pause on that. Most of you are pretty active, or at least actively thinking about sex or sexy thoughts or things like that. And when I said even sex with yourself, I'm not talking about even sex with yourself. That is a way though to feel sexy. And also I am an advocate of it because it is a way to, in my opinion, to not be promiscuous. I don't understand why somebody would, and they also said to me that nobody's really concerned about sexually transmitted diseases anymore. And I don't understand, how did that happen, that so many people are having sex and they said, oh, they're using condoms. No, they're not. And they even admitted that no, they don't. So how are we not transmitting sexual diseases? I don't understand that. Did it stop? Is the itching constant so nobody notices? I don't know. So, I I think in every way when people are promiscuous or just simply having casual sex in their relationships, that is damaging for a lot of people. And as I said, the risk and the outcomes are just too great. And I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if everyone is foregoing, these what amounts to theoretical concepts of a life that may be conceived and then destroyed. Has that become a theoretical concept? I just think that if we are to get really truly beyond this epidemic of anxiety and depression that we have, and really also get beyond the chaos that has been created in society, we really have to take a realistic view at our behavior and how animalistic our behavior can be, right? And I cannot imagine that. No, you can believe whatever you want to believe, right? But the more that you believe that you were just brought into this world and are the top notch of the bunch, um you know is just yeah, just I just think it's very limited thinking. So being casual about those things, again, I can't even theoretically think how they wouldn't be damaging. And the fact that somebody doesn't think about the damage theoretically of these casual relationships and casual sex when you're talking about conception and destruction of life, right? So casually talking about plan B. And my first thought was, well, thank God it cost $60, which she thought was a lot of money, or somebody thought was a lot of money. And in my mind, that's not a lot of money at all. So thank God somebody's perspective is that $60 or $70 is a lot of money. But again, then where's the concept? Where's your, conceptual ideas about conceiving, right? And destroying a life? Where are your ideas about that? And, somebody else was saying again about beliefs and no evidence, and beliefs are, something that has no evidence or whatever, saying this kind of thing. And just the real destruction of humanity when you cannot see not only the good in our behavior, but also the inhumanity in our behavior. Again, and I'm going to say it again, what is our theme for this entire classroom? I do have a thesis for the entire classroom. For every single class that I have, there is a thesis to it. And it comes from the book American Slavery, American Freedom by Edward Morgan, which I've repeated numerous times. And that is, how is it that in the name of humanity, we can destroy human dignity and honor every hour of every day in our search for it, in our very heartfelt, fervent search for equality, humanity, and human dignity? How is it that we can then destroy it every hour of every day? So back to what I'm saying here with sexy and sexiness. There is a dark hole that we travel down, and it's not that one, but it can be. And it's a great analogy that we travel down that we have no business going down. Remember, there are some things that cannot, no, things, everything, especially the more shocking it is and the more out of our realm of concept it is, that we cannot erase, we cannot unsee it, or we cannot unhear it. So we really have to protect ourselves. Why? Why? Because Dr. Feravich says you need to be pure. Is that why? You have to protect your eyes and your ears from that dirty, nasty stuff, because Dr. Feravich said that you are what? Going to have a horrible life? It's not good for you. You're going to go down a rabbit trail that doesn't look like a rabbit trail. It looks like something deeper and darker than that. Physically, mentally, spiritually. So, is that reason enough? I mean, so that's what I'm telling you, basically. I might take a drink right here for a minute. I got a bad signal for a sec. Having lots of dropped frames today from Xfinity, but it hasn't been too bad. I've been able to stay online. So I'm happy about that. Set the bar pretty low. So I tell you that is, animalistic behavior, right? It's not dignified behavior, right? And so I tell you that. And so you're supposed to listen and do it. Think about this. It's a critical thinking classroom. We have these negative feelings that hang on for reasons. And I tell you as a psychologist that what you are supposed to be doing is you are supposed to be going through those doors. You cannot go around this. So in this idea of sexy that we've got here, that feeling of, as I was saying yesterday, confidence that you get out of feeling sexy does not come from sex. The feeling of confidence that you get out of feeling sexy does not come from having sex. Think about when you feel sexy. Now, I'm not saying that you haven't learned or occasionally, and hopefully if you're married, it's more than occasionally, feel sexy during sex. I'm not saying that. I'm talking about loveless sex is what I'm talking about. Loveless sex. So tell me how you feel. I cleaned my eyeballs out and now I feel like I've got something there. In loveless sex. How sexy do you feel in loveless sex? And even sex with ourselves, which I promote because I think it keeps us from being promiscuous, still does not make me feel sexy. It doesn't make me feel confident and sexy. I'm not saying I can't, just like I'm not saying I can't during sex. I'm just saying when and we think about it in the way of confidence, not in the way of the act of sex. So if you think about sexy in the way of confidence, what do you do that makes you feel sexy? Okay, let's start with a great example for me that I think is a great example is somebody who plays music, right? Especially music that I love. I mean, Eddie Murphy said it a long time ago. Musicians just get the women, and he said it a little differently. But musicians just get the women. And why? Why? Because there's something really sexy about doing something that you are really good at and that you really love. I said I was watching over the weekend Halt and Catch Fire. And the girl who was so stunningly beautiful, of course, they wouldn't have a lead character that was a female that wouldn't be stunningly beautiful. But she's got this punk haircut and she's got this, skinny little, waif little body or whatever, but she's still beautiful and she's the daughter of the Terminator woman there. So, and like took on her looks like fourscore and whatever exponent you want to put on that. I don't care. But she was, every person that came in contact with her found her attractive, right? It was the same thing with the main lead character, male figure, who of course, again, is gorgeous. But what about this person was sexy? This is what we're saying yesterday in yesterday's our day 27 episode of Critical Thinking, it is the level of confidence, right? And you cannot fake that fake confidence. It comes from self-esteem, it comes from optimism and resilience that you need to feel that cannot be faked, right? So, what do you do that makes you feel sexy? What do you do, in other words, what do you do that makes you feel confident? What is it that you do that makes you feel sexy? What is it that makes you feel confident? And now I'm not saying dominant, right? Speaking to men out there, right? I'm not saying what makes you feel dominant because the feeling there is really not sexy. There is no inviting another partner into a dominant relationship, right? There is no invite. Nobody wants to be in that relationship. I'm not saying, sexually or whatever. I'm just saying nobody, that's abuse. Abuse when somebody dominates you. It's slavery, right? It is trafficking, whatever. Nobody wants to be in that position. So if it's if you are dominating, right? That's not sexy. Nobody wants to be invited in, and sexy should be inviting somebody. It should be inviting to people. Sexiness should be inviting to people, right? So if you're thinking that I feel sexy when I dominate, you're wrong. You're wrong. You are wrong. You might feel that way. It's a learned thing, but it's not sexy because it's not inviting, right? Okay, so some things to think about. We're in a critical thinking class, and we may have perversions that go way back. I came up with this idea on Mother's Day and wanted to be changing my thoughts around this idea of what I think is probably most interesting to this group, which is getting together with somebody that you are attracted to, that is attracted to you, and that you begin to have this sort of give and take relationship. That's what makes you feel sexy. So what do you do by yourself that makes you feel confident and sexy by yourself? That makes you feel sexy, that builds you, that also has this layer of confidence, that builds this layer of confidence. So again, you could clearly see this. Go watch a music video of your favorite music, right? Of your favorite musician. And for me, play around with it a little bit so you see a musician that is singing from the heart and soul, right? So maybe wrote their own music, wrote their own lyrics, something like that, and then is driving that with their heart and soul. That is sexy. That is sexy. And it's like I said, what Eddie Murphy said about they just get all the women, the musicians do. So what do you do? I find anyone who plays a guitar, woo, oh yeah, I play the guitar a little bit. So there's an appreciation for it. And I cannot put the work into it to play better. I'm a teacher. That's what I do. I don't teach music either. So this is what I do. So I just cannot put the effort into playing a guitar for 100 reasons. And I can't do it. I wish it was magical for me. I wish I could pick it up and I didn't have to put all that hard work in, and then I could play every single song I wanted to play and feel sexy about it. But I don't. I don't have that talent. I don't have it. And so I leave it to other people to make me look at them and feel like they are really sexy when they play music, right? So back to the beginning of this with the Mother's Day story, right? So what do I want? What am I suggesting that you do? What did I do? I turned on my music really loud and I danced is what I did in my bedroom. That's what I did. And I thought about this. This is also what I do to make myself feel confident as I think about my classroom. I think about my classroom. I think about my students. I think about what I want them to learn that is so important to me. That's the reason why I'm passionate about what I do, about teaching. It's because I really want you to learn these things, right? It's the same thing that we see when we're taking a look at a good book, right? How does an author write a good book that makes you want to read it? Because they really, really want you to hear it, right? They really want you to hear it. Their story that they have in their head or that took place in their life or whatever. They really want you to hear it. And so so maybe writing makes you feel more sexy and confident. Maybe singing makes you feel more sexy and confident. Maybe preparing for your lecture makes you feel more sexy and confident. Maybe writing your goals down on a piece of paper makes you feel more sexy or confident. Maybe going, now you got to watch it. You cannot be feeling sexy and confident because you did a big giant shopping spree, right? But treating yourself to something for a reason, not just because you are so good, building up your self-esteem on nothing, but you do treat yourself. I treat myself to these flowers. Why? Because I'm in a classroom and I'm doing this, because I want to do it. And that's my reward, having a nice looking classroom where I paid for that piece of art sculpture up there, right? There, right? So I paid for that. I have my beautiful backdrop of my beautiful lawn that I actually, since I didn't get on, you didn't know I got my lawnmower. And after all of those mystery things and not being able to trust anybody in the entire area to come and do my lawn, I talked last year to try and get somebody to do winter cleanup. Couldn't get them to do that winter cleanup for me. And so I bought a lawnmower. It came in on Thursday, had a couple issues with it, and I have been mowing my lawn, little chunks of it because I have a pretty big lawn. I didn't realize how big it was actually for mowing. I used to mow 3 acres when I was a little girl, right? But I did have a riding, no, that's not true. I pushed. Then when they got the riding lawnmower, they let my younger sister take over the lawn mowing. I think I did have the rider for a little while. I probably did because I did learn how to drive it. So I must have had the rider for a while. But anyway, this is a walk behind because I have lots of terrain and it's just not safe. It wouldn't be safe. So it's a walk behind and I plowed through my lawn and I just love it. And then what I did on Mother's Day after that, after I did my music and dancing in my bedroom to make myself feel a little more sexy. After I did that, I actually binged The Halt and Catch Fire after that. So episode, and those seasons are long. Oh my gosh. There's 3 discs, 3 hours. So 9 hours of binging is what I did. Not all of it on Mother's Day, but season 1 and season 2, I did binge, except for the last CD. So I have like 3 hours left of it. And it was so good. So that was the other thing that I did. So to help me feel better, about, just not having a great Mother's Day and, about all kinds of things that have been going on for the last 2 years that have been really, really just almost the weight can seem unbearable because 2 years ago I lost my husband. So we'll just start there. Who didn't have a will and didn't and my family isn't doing very well since then. So, but it's a story that's happening all over the place. Families falling apart, people not believing in what is going on, and certainly losing their beliefs in a higher power because, from a great many perspectives, how is it that a higher power would not come through on his promise to solve this, right? Come to my spiritual classroom and we have some answers for that as well. Okay? Yeah, think about what I have today for my spiritual classroom, actually. All right. And so, where Oh, shut off the wrong thing. All right, so let's get to our critical thinking classroom. So this is where I left off yesterday talking to you about how being an optimist, how does explanatory style predict success? So what is explanatory style? Explanatory style is, are you an optimist or are you a pessimist? So if you recall, here were the measures that we had. So there were the questions. I talked about this likely in day 25 is when I talked about taking a look at the measures that you have. And they basically are measures of control that we are looking at. So I'm going across right now, and this is just a little review of the measures that we talked about in the last couple episodes of this critical thinking. And then yesterday in our day 27, I took a closer look at the outcomes of optimism and pessimism. So what we looked at there at the top there, we looked at wins and losses for teams. So team standings that we had. We looked at, so this is actually like physical outcomes of optimism and pessimism. Then we also looked at times and improvement on times from swim time number 1, when they were told that they had poor scores, to swim time number 2, who improved more, right? I got to take a look at that again. And make sure that I explain that right. But we're going to go on. Here's the immunity as well. All right. So the immunity is demonstrating that those individuals with higher levels of optimism were had lower inflammation, and in fact, even so much to say as had a reduced inflammation. And what we talked about there is we talked about how this relates to levels of what we were saying were true grit, right? Our measure of true grit. So the possible stress of the study and getting the vaccination created a kickback in the system so that there actually was a reduction in inflammation. That could be possible when your body and your mind and your spirit learn how to deal with stressful situations. So now here again, we are taking a look at physical outcomes of having a more optimistic style. And I'm going to keep going to this because this is the bottom line. It's a bottom line for resilience. It's a bottom line for self-esteem. It's the bottom line for optimism. It is the bottom line for pretty much everything that we are talking about. And that is mastering a task. And how do we master a task? We master a task in increments. Right? We don't go from day 1 on playing the guitar to being a prodigy on day number 2 of playing the guitar, or even a week later, or even a month later, or even a year later. I'm not saying that we don't have prodigies. Of course we do. But what we have to have in our mind, I was not a prodigy. I wasn't a prodigy. And I'm still in the top 1% as far as intellect goes, basically. Right? I mean, somebody can challenge it for sure, but whatever, right? And I'm not a prodigy. So although we have prodigies, we don't have very many prodigies. And people who are prodigies in certain ways may not be recognized in that same way. For example, I'm thinking right now, George Washington, right? In our Bookless classroom, we talk about George Washington. I happen to think he was such a man for the times, that so outstanding a man for the times, that he in his own right was a prodigy. But if you go to his grades, he wasn't that great in school. He was a great soldier, and he was extremely courageous. So that and of itself made him a prodigy. And how did he work on it? He wasn't a great soldier right away. He was in a number of battles and was a strategizer, right? Strategic planning for those battles. So it wasn't immediate for Washington either. These come in increments. And what happens when we build our skills in increments and we don't expect to master them all at one time? We increase real levels of self-esteem. We increase real optimism, right? And we become more resilient. We develop the true grit it takes to refine our skills over time. Why? Because nobody wants to stick it out. That's the reason why. So that's why it becomes true grit. Nobody wants to stick it out. So when you do, it is real grit. And what is the payoff? The payoff is refining the skills. How long, Dr. Feravich? 10,000 hours. 10,000 hours. But what's the payoff then, Dr. Feravich? You're the expert. Then you are the expert. What a payoff. What a payoff. And you know what? Here's another tricky thing about it. Oftentimes, by 10,000 hours, you become, the payoff is you believe that you are the expert after 10,000 hours. But at 5,000 hours, you may have all the education, but not the hours in, and you don't believe you're the expert. There's this inside, there's this feeling that somebody's going to find me out, that I really don't know as much as I sound like I do. You know what? That's par for the course as well. All of us. I did. I talked about it with a friend in my classroom about that exact problem of feeling like in graduate school, I was doing it right. I was getting A's, but there was a part of me that's like, holy smokes, how is this happening? Because I really feel like I'm going to fall on my face sooner or later. So it is a real common feeling of that I'm going to fall on my face or that I'm inadequate. And that feeling begins to dissipate as we gain hours. And those hours doing what? Doing what? Refining our skill right there so that we master it with what kind of performance? A high level of performance. We can still master it. We are learning to master it with a low level of performance, but a high level of performance is where we want to be when we've truly mastered something, right? So here, I want you to take a look at these descriptions. And then I want you to think about which one of those descriptions best describe you, all right? So it is easy for me to become emotionally close to others. I am comfortable depending on others and having others depend on me. I don't worry about being alone or having others not accept me. Does that sound like you in your relationships? I am comfortable without close emotional relationships. It is very important for me to feel independent and self-sufficient, and I prefer not to depend on others or have others depend on me. So you're comfortable without close relationships. I want to be completely emotionally intimate with others, but I often find that others are reluctant to get as close as I would like. I am uncomfortable being without close relationships, but I sometimes worry that others don't value me as much as I value them. Does that describe you? That others are reluctant to get as close as you would like. Or the last one, I am uncomfortable getting close to others. I want emotional, close relationships, but I find it difficult to trust others completely or to depend on them. I worry that I will be hurt if I allow myself to become too close to others. You find it difficult to trust others or depend on them. And you worry that you're going to be hurt if you come too close. All right, so think about that for a minute and look those over. I'm going to give you just another minute to think about which one of those best describe you. Okay. Hopefully you've been able to read through those a little bit longer and then think about which one of those relationships best describe you. Okay. Now, actually, I want to go to this one. This slide. What we do then, once we see the description, then we are able to, as psychologists, look at the type of relationship that basically defines. So those are definitions or descriptions of 4 different types of relationships, which basically describe very broadly all of our relationships. So what is this? This is attachment theory is what this is. In psychology, we call this attachment theory. So when you took a look at those 4 descriptions, although they are pretty broad, they probably likely do describe one of those descriptions, probably likely do describe how you handle relationships pretty well. It describes you pretty well, probably, right? We usually fall, not always, but likely, but most of the time, very neatly into one of those descriptions. It's one of the wonderful things about this theory. And then you can see on the left there the 4 different titles or descriptors that we have for those descriptions, right? Those titles for those descriptions. So the first one, it is easy for me to become emotionally close to others. I am comfortable depending on others and having others depend on me. I don't worry about being alone or having others not accept me. That describes, according to Bartholomew and Horowitz in 1991, a secure relationship. So this is when they were doing research on attachment theory, but in particular, attachment into adulthood, because a child wouldn't describe this relationship with their mother, right? But in adults, I can describe my relationships using these explanations. Number 2, I am comfortable without close relationships. It is very important for me to feel independent and self-sufficient, and I prefer not to depend on others or to have others depend on me. We call this dismissing, a dismissing relationship. And we're going to get to more of this in a little bit. But basically, these individuals are independent, completely independent. And they don't believe that they need relationships. And since I don't need a relationship, according to somebody who is dismissing, since I don't need a relationship, neither should you. Okay? That's dismissing. I want to be completely emotionally intimate with others, but I often find that others are reluctant to get as close as I would like. I am uncomfortable being without close relationships, but I sometimes worry that others don't value me as much as I value them. This is a preoccupied relationship. These individuals tend to be more clingy. They tend to be more depressed and anxious in their relationships. I'm going to show you in a what would you call it? In a two by two is what it's called. A 2 by 2 framework is what I'm going to show you what these really mean. So what are the behaviors and the feelings that go along with this? But just follow me along right now as I describe the rest of these, or the last of these attachment styles, right? So the 4 descriptions on the left, descriptors on the left are attachment styles. So the last one there, I am uncomfortable getting close to others. I want emotionally close relationships, but I find it difficult to trust others completely or to depend on them. I worry that I will be hurt if I allow myself to become too close to others. So this attachment style is described as a fearful attachment style. Okay? All right, I'm going to let you just for another, couple seconds take a look at that so you can kind of contemplate and critically think over those attachment styles along with those descriptions. Okay. Were you able to identify that for yourself, your attachment style? Did it kind of really jump out at you? Let me give you some more descriptors for these attachment styles, and then they can help you better understand. And the more that we understand our attachment styles, the more we are capable of changing them. What you're going to hear me say, I'm going to say it now for the first time. You're going to hear me say a lot. This is the key. What we have in attachment styles is what we get is our mental representations of what relationships are supposed to be like. That's what attachment style is. A mental representation of what our relationships are supposed to be like. So if we spend a little time thinking about our childhood and growing up, what do you think a marriage is like? Do you think a marriage is long lasting or no? Do you think that people are promiscuous in all relationships? It's just what is expected or no? Do you think that the mother works in the marriage or not? Do you believe in your relationship that you even get married? Right? Do you believe in having children? How do you believe in raising those children? Do you believe in raising those children with an iron fist? Do you believe in nurturing? Do you believe in never spanking? Do you make sure that you have nutritious food on the table all the time? Or are you the person that takes them out to eat? Those are all beliefs that you have regarding the way that relationships work. Do you think the man is dominant and the woman is submissive? Do you think that the man tries to be dominant, but they're always hiding from the the tyrant wife? And that's why marriages never work. What are your beliefs that you have about the way that relationships, a couple, right? Your peer, a couple, the way that relationship is supposed to work? Because you have ideas, right? You have ideas of what happens out in front of people, the public couple, and what happens actually behind closed doors, the private family. You have ideas and beliefs about how that works. Those are your mental representations. And what they end up creating then are specific behaviors, just like the ones that we see listed there. Okay, let's move on. And this is what I wanted to show you here. So I wanted to show you these are the elements that create this 2x2 table. That was the word I was looking for. Table. What was that word again? Table. I'm sorry. I was only using, Excel tables and creating tables since, the dawn of time. So here, and now just a quick look at what I have there on the left there. So it says attachment, belonging, and trusting. What is our major motivation for attachment? There is one more for attachment. But right now we're going to look at these two major, because the third one is tertiary. It's not as evident. It's not as strong as these other two. With belonging being the strongest, and trusting not being a far behind it is a close second. So why is it that we attach? And this attachment that we're talking about really is, I'll call it magical, right? But, it's in our DNA. It just happens. It simply happens. Nobody said, all right, sit down, Annette, and now's the time for you to create mental representations of attachment. Sorry, I'm not going to give you any rules to make sure that the people you attach to are healthy. I don't give you those rules. Sit down and start attaching. No, it's part of our DNA from infancy. And we're going to talk about that coming up. But what I wanted to do first, before we talk about the infancy attachment, is to get you to connect to the mental representations that you have for adult relationships and how they fall in to one of these four categories. And they are so important because they are motivated by two of the most basic motivations that we have that were written in our DNA, is what I'm saying. This motivation to belong and attach happens in infancy and throughout time creates stronger and stronger mental representations of what relationships look like. You can take any relationship. You have a mental relationship for what a relationship looks like between two brothers. For me, they're always fighting or physically fighting. They're always physical with one another. A relationship, a mental representation between two sisters. Coloring, that's my mental representation. Sitting quietly, playing with Barbies or coloring. It's my mental representation, not yours, right? A mental representation of parents. Fighting, but also loving. That's my mental representation. My parents fought a lot, but they loved each other deeply. Although I do think that my mom kind of wavered on that love, and rightfully so, Dad. Anyway, in his defense, my dad didn't ever waver on his love, although likely did waver on his fidelity. So those are, but I didn't know that till much later. So my mental representations of fidelity are, actually, I have mental representations of relationships lasting forever as well. Lasting forever, that you are faithful forever. And that I have mental representations of how you do that now, right? I got through it, I got through it. So, and we were faithful to one another, but that does not mean that we didn't fall short of the mark, especially considering what the mark is. So, which is any thought of another person is adultery, right? So when you have that thought, and so I've said, and going right to the very beginning, some things, some pictures that we have in our mind, that we get in our mind, once seen cannot be unseen. Once heard cannot be unheard. We've had that with our friends. We've seen pictures of things. Oh my gosh, I can't unsee that. That is the truth. And sometimes the curiosity of the mind replays those things that you shouldn't have seen over and over again, as you work to keep those things out of your mind. So our drive for this attachment is based in our DNA. It's biological. How do we know? Because it happens in infancy, and those mental representations that are created from infancy are similar, all with great high correlations with the mental representations that we have as adults. So, this is where I will come back and we'll talk about what those very much more specific elements that create those mental representations are on that table. This is Dr. Annette Feravich, and I am the teacher. Thank you for joining me in the classroom. We are here in the critical thinking classroom. I sure hope that I gave you a whole bunch of really creative things to think about. I will be back here in an hour for my spiritual classroom. Thank you for joining me.